The galaxy was vast and filled with mysteries that had remained unsolved for millennia, its billions of stars and planets teeming with life beyond human comprehension. Yet humanity stood at the cusp of greatness, not as an advanced civilization, but as a species that had just begun to rise from the ashes of its past. While other races looked on with curiosity and suspicion, humans saw only one path forward: to conquer the unknown and establish their place among the stars. Commander Avon Holt stood on the observation deck of the flagship Intrepid, gazing out at the swirling nebula that dotted the expanse of space. The stars seemed distant and unreachable, but he knew that behind every star there was a world waiting to be discovered. Humanity was no longer confined to Earth. They had spread across the solar system and were now reaching out to the distant stars with the ambition of an entire species driving them forward. Holt's thoughts were interrupted by the sharp sound of footsteps echoing behind him. He turned to see his second-in-command, Lieutenant Maya Collins, enter the room, her eyes filled with urgency. The message had come through the fleet's deep space communications network. The Urath had initiated contact with the human colonies. They were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy, known for their advanced technology and their ruthless approach to diplomacy. Their reputation was one of cold calculation and strategic maneuvering, yet their message was clear and direct. Humanity was to be tested. A series of challenges had been issued with the promise of rewards and recognition should the humans succeed. Commander Holt furrowed his brow. A challenge from the Urath was not something to be taken lightly. He had heard stories of civilizations that had been swallowed up by the Urath's insatiable desire for dominance. They were a species with no tolerance for weakness, and any failure would likely lead to destruction. Holt knew that this would be the greatest test humanity had ever faced, a chance to prove they were more than just a young and fragile race. As Holt processed the information, he turned to Collins, who was waiting for his orders, her expression unwavering. "What do you think, Maya?" he asked, his voice calm, but heavy with the weight of what was to come. "I think we should take it head-on, sir," she replied. "This is our chance to show them we are not to be underestimated. We faced impossible odds before, and come out victorious. We can do it again." Holt nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. The Urath would not make this easy, but humanity had something that no other species could replicate: the tenacity, the drive to survive, and the sheer will to overcome any challenge that came their way. "We'll do it," Holt said finally. "Prepare the crew. We'll be ready for whatever they throw at us." With it, the crew of the Intrepid began their preparations for the unknown. They didn't know what trials awaited them or what kind of enemies they would face. But one thing was certain: humanity would not back down from this challenge. They would rise to meet it head-on and prove to the galaxy that they were not just a species to be pitied or underestimated, but one that could stand tall among the stars. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. As the Intrepid and its fleet prepared for the upcoming trials the Urath had set out for them, Holt had insisted that they keep the crew focused on the task at hand and avoid distractions. But it was impossible not to feel the weight of the moment. The entire fleet was on edge, every member of the crew, from the engineers working to ensure the ship was in perfect condition to the strategists who pored over data trying to anticipate the Urath's moves, was preparing for something that could either elevate humanity to new heights or see it crushed beneath the weight of galactic power. The first trial was announced on the third day. It would take place in the heart of an ancient asteroid field, long untouched by any civilization. The Urath had chosen this location as the site of the first test because it was known to be a hazardous place filled with shifting debris and rogue asteroids. The challenge would be to navigate through the field while maintaining the integrity of the fleet. The test would begin in 24 hours, and Holt knew that this would be their first real chance to show the Urath what humanity was capable of. Commander Holt stood in the command center. As his crew prepared for the trial, he felt the tension in the air as the crew moved with practiced precision. But even they couldn't hide the uncertainty of the moment. Maya stood beside him, her eyes scanning the display screens as they showed the asteroid field in all its chaotic glory. "This is no ordinary field, sir," Maya said, her voice low. "The Urath designed this test to exploit any weakness we might have. They want to see if we'll falter, if we'll panic." Holt nodded, his jaw set in determination. "And that's exactly what they won't see," he replied. "We're going to navigate this field and come out on the other side without a scratch." The fleet gathered in formation as they approached the asteroid field. The space around them was filled with the scattered remnants of ancient worlds broken apart by forces unknown. The rocks floated in a deadly dance as they collided and bounced off each other. The space ahead was a maze of chaos and danger, but Holt's mind was clear. "Activate the shields," he ordered as the Intrepid moved forward into the field. The other ships in the fleet followed in tight formation, staying close to one another as they passed through the field at maximum speed. As they entered the asteroid field, the ship jolted slightly as the sensors picked up debris. But Holt remained calm, his eyes fixed on the screen ahead. The ships were flying in perfect synchrony, avoiding the larger asteroids by inches, while making quick adjustments to dodge smaller rocks that appeared out of nowhere. The crew worked like a well-oiled machine, with every member doing their part to keep the ship steady. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours as the fleet navigated deeper into the field. Holt's heart raced as he watched the asteroid field. On the view screen, a giant rock appeared ahead, and he barked orders as the ship made a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding a collision. The other ships followed suit, staying in formation as they pushed further into the field. But suddenly, a larger asteroid appeared from the shadows, heading straight for the fleet. Holt's mind raced as he calculated the trajectory. The fleet needed to move faster. They had to break formation or risk disaster. "Break formation now," Holt shouted. "Move to the left." The ships swerved in unison, pulling away from the massive asteroid that would have obliterated them all. The fleet was now scattered across the field, avoiding rocks from all directions. But Holt's confidence remained unshaken. He knew they could do this. They had the skill and the will to survive. One by one, the ships maneuvered around the deadly obstacles, the Intrepid at the forefront with Holt's steady hand, guiding them through the storm of rock and chaos until finally they emerged on the other side, the fleet intact with no casualties. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, but Holt's mind remained focused. They had passed the first test, but the Urath were watching, and this was only the beginning. The moment the fleet emerged from the asteroid field, a sense of accomplishment rippled through the crew, but Commander Holt knew that their victory was temporary. The Urath had already set their sights on the next challenge, and it was far more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. The challenge would take them to a planet known as Kairos, a desolate world covered in shifting sands and violent storms. The Urath had informed them that they were to land on the planet and recover an ancient artifact hidden deep within a temple buried beneath the sand. It was a test not only of their skill and resourcefulness, but of their ability to survive in one of the harshest environments in the galaxy. The fleet set course for Kairos, and within days they had arrived at the planet's orbit. The surface below was a swirling mass of golden sandstorms that seemed to consume everything in their path. Holt's eyes narrowed as he studied the planet's surface. On the view screen, the storm clouds obscured most of the terrain, but the temple was there just beyond the reach of the storms, buried beneath the ever-shifting sands. Maya approached him with a map of the planet's surface, her face serious. "The artifact is deep within the temple, sir. It's surrounded by traps and hidden dangers. We'll need to move carefully and quickly if we're going to retrieve it and return without getting caught in the storms." Holt nodded, his expression grim. He had no doubt the Urath had designed this test to break them, to see if they could survive the harsh conditions of the planet and navigate the perilous terrain. But he wasn't about to let his crew fail, not after they had come so far. "Prepare the landing party," Holt ordered. "We're going down there, and we're bringing that artifact back no matter what it takes." The shuttle descended through the thick atmosphere of Kairos, its hull vibrating. As they entered the storm clouds outside, the view screen was filled with swirling sand and dust. The crew inside the shuttle strapped themselves in. As Holt surveyed the situation, Maya was by his side, her hand resting on the controls. "I've got the coordinates," Maya said. "We should be able to make it through the storm if we stay on course." Holt nodded. "Keep us steady. We need to get in and out fast." The shuttle lurched as they broke through the clouds, and the sands of the planet below came into view. They were only a few miles away from the temple, but the storm was fierce, And it was only getting worse. Holt gritted his teeth. As the winds howled around them, sand battered the shuttle's exterior, and visibility dropped to near zero. "Hold tight," Maya shouted as she fought to keep the shuttle on course. The ship swerved as another gust of wind struck it, but Maya's skill kept them on track. They were close to the temple, now the sandstorm raging around them, as they descended toward the ancient structure. The landing was rough, but they made it, the shuttle skidding across the desert floor, before coming to a stop in front of the temple's massive entrance. The ancient stone structure loomed above them, its surface worn by time and the desert winds. Holt wasted no time. He gathered his team and led them toward the entrance. The wind howled around them, but the door to the temple stood open, as if waiting for them to enter. Inside the temple, it was dark and silent, the air thick with the scent of age and dust. The crew moved cautiously through the hallways, their boots echoing off the stone as they descended deeper into the structure. Holt kept his eyes peeled for any signs of danger. Every turn could lead to a trap, and he knew the Urath would make sure this test was nothing less than deadly. They reached the central chamber, the artifact resting on a pedestal in the center of the room. But as Holt approached the pedestal, a sudden rumble shook the temple. The walls began to shift, and the ground cracked open beneath them. The Urath had set their trap, and now the real challenge was beginning. The ground beneath them trembled as cracks snaked along the ancient stone floor. Holt's heart raced as the entire temple seemed to groan with the weight of some unseen force. The team quickly spread out, taking cover behind columns and walls. As the chamber shook, a low rumble echoed through the corridors, and then a massive explosion of sand and stone erupted from the walls, sending debris flying in every direction. Holt ducked instinctively as rocks and dust pelted him, but his mind was already calculating their next move. The temple was alive with the sound of shifting stone and creaking beams. He knew that the Urath had designed this test not only to test their survival skills, but to see how they responded under pressure. "Get to the artifact," Holt barked, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We need to grab it and get out now." Maya nodded from across the room, her eyes scanning the shifting debris for any signs of danger. She gestured to the team, and they moved in unison towards the pedestal, where the artifact lay gleaming in the dim light. But the moment they moved, the walls seemed to react. The ground split open, and massive stone pillars rose from the floor, trapping them in place. Holt barely had time to process what was happening before the ceiling above began to crack, revealing sharp stalactites hanging ominously over their heads. "We're not alone," Maya muttered under her breath as she ducked to avoid a falling rock. Holt looked around, realizing the temple was more than just a ruin. It was a living trap, designed to punish anyone who dared disturb its secrets. The sandstorm outside raged harder now, and the shrieking winds seemed to mix with the rumbling of the collapsing structure. The team had no choice but to fight their way to the artifact. "Move!" Holt shouted as he grabbed the edge of the pedestal and yanked it free from the stone. The moment it was in his hand, the temple's walls seemed to groan in response, and then everything changed. The floor cracked open, and a massive mechanical creature burst forth from the depths, its eyes glowing with a cold red light, and its many limbs clanking as it rose to its full height. The team instinctively raised their weapons, but Holt held up a hand to stop them. The creature wasn't attacking, it was waiting, watching them with an intelligence that sent a chill down his spine. The Urath had likely programmed it to test their resolve and force them to make a choice: fight or run. Holt gripped the artifact tighter and made his decision. "We're not staying to fight this thing," he ordered. "Get to the exit now." The team sprinted towards the temple's entrance as the mechanical creature stalked behind them, its movements swift and deliberate. Every step it took sending tremors through the ground, but they were faster. Holt's eyes were locked on the exit as the team pushed through the narrow hallways, dodging falling debris and obstacles. The creature was relentless, its metallic limbs scraping against the walls as it pursued them. But they were almost there, just a few more steps. "Out of the way!" Maya yelled as she kicked a loose stone aside, revealing the hidden door to the outside world. They ran through the opening just as the mechanical creature lunged after them, its massive jaws snapping shut inches from Holt's heels. They emerged into the storm once more, the winds biting at their skin, and the sand stinging their faces, but the artifact was in their hands, and they had survived the Urath's trap. Now all that was left was to return to the ship and await the next test. The galaxy was watching, and Holt knew this was just the beginning of humanity's true trial. The storm raged around them as they sprinted toward the shuttle that would take them back to the fleet. The wind howled like a living thing trying to tear them apart. But Holt kept his focus on the ship ahead. The crew was already on board preparing for takeoff. Maya was the first to reach the shuttle door, and she held it open for the rest of the team to climb inside. Holt was the last to enter, and as he did, he glanced over his shoulder to see the mechanical creature, still looming in the distance, its glowing eyes watching them with an unblinking stare. But the team was already inside. The door slammed shut, and the shuttle shot into the air just as the creature took a step forward. "That was too close," Maya muttered, as she checked the ship's systems, the artifact secured in a containment box beside her. The rest of the crew was still catching their breath, but the danger wasn't over yet. Holt knew the Urath had no intention of letting them rest. Their next trial was already waiting. "We did what we had to do," Holt said, but his voice was grim. "We got the artifact, but I'm not sure they'll be satisfied with just that. The Urath always push for more." Maya nodded as she wiped the sweat from her brow. "We've proven we can survive their tests, but they're not going to stop testing us until they're sure we're worthy, and I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet." Holt turned to the window as the shuttle broke through the storm clouds and into the clear sky above Kairos. Below, the planet was still a desolate wasteland, but it felt like a small victory just to be leaving it behind. The fleet was waiting in orbit, and soon they would be back in the safety of their ships. But Holt's mind was already racing forward to the next challenge, the next trial that the Urath would throw at them. The shuttle docked with the flagship Intrepid, and Holt stepped out onto the deck. The crew was waiting for them, and they all gathered around the artifact. It was an ancient relic that pulsed with an eerie energy. Holt could feel it in his bones, a force beyond human understanding. But they had it now, and that was all that mattered. "Well done, everyone," Holt said, addressing the crew, but his eyes were focused on the artifact. "We've completed the first part of the trial, but we're far from finished." The crew nodded in agreement, knowing that their success was only temporary. Holt's voice hardened as he continued, "The Urath will see this as just a small victory. They won't be satisfied until they know we are ready for the galaxy's greatest challenges, and I have no doubt they will test us again with even greater force." Maya stepped forward, her face determined. "Then we're ready for whatever comes next, sir. We've proven we can adapt and survive. We've come this far, and we'll go even farther." Holt studied her for a moment, then turned his gaze to the rest of the crew. Their eyes were full of resolve and strength. They had faced down the first challenge and emerged victorious. But Holt knew the Urath were not interested in simple victories. They were looking for something far greater. They wanted to see if humanity could endure the most extreme trials, and if they could stand as equals among the ancient powers of the galaxy. The Intrepid remained in orbit around Kairos, but Holt could sense the clock ticking down. The next challenge was coming, and they needed to be ready for it. Whatever it was, the galaxy had watched their first test, and now the real trial was about to begin. The next morning, the message came through from the Urath, their voice cold and impersonal, as it echoed through the command center of the Intrepid. Holt stood at the front of the room, his eyes fixed on the holographic display that projected the Urath's transmission. It was a simple message, but the meaning was clear. The next trial would take place on the planet Zethra, an ancient world known for its sprawling cities and dangerous wildlife, a place where even the most experienced explorers hesitated to venture. The Urath had chosen this planet for a reason. They were testing humanity's ability to not only survive, but thrive in an environment that could break even the strongest of civilizations. Holt turned to Maya as the message ended, her face unreadable, but he could see the concern in her eyes. The stakes were higher now. The Urath were no longer just watching to see if humanity could survive. They were looking for something more. They wanted to see if humans could adapt, if they could prove themselves worthy of being part of the galactic elite. "We have to prepare for anything," Holt said, as he paced across the room. "Zethra isn't a place you go lightly. The wildlife is aggressive, and the terrain is unforgiving. If we're going to make it through this trial, we'll need to be at our best." Maya nodded. "We'll need all hands on deck for this one, sir. I'll start preparing the crew for the dangers ahead." The fleet set course for Zethra, and the days leading up to their arrival were filled with preparations. The crew trained for every possible scenario, from wild animal encounters to survival in harsh climates. But despite all their readiness, there was a nagging feeling in the back of Holt's mind, a sense that the Urath had something far more insidious planned, something that would push humanity to its limits and beyond. As the Intrepid entered Zethra's atmosphere, the planet below came into view, a sprawling world covered in dense jungles and towering mountains. The landscape seemed alien yet familiar, as if the planet was designed to test those who dared to set foot on it. Holt stood on the observation deck, once more his eyes narrowing as he studied the planet's surface. The storm clouds that surrounded the world were thick and violent, making it impossible to see much of the terrain. Maya approached him once more, her voice low and serious. "The Urath's message didn't tell us what we're supposed to do on the surface, just that we have to survive and prove ourselves worthy." "I don't like the ambiguity, sir. It could mean anything." Holt's jaw tightened as he considered her words. The uncertainty of the trial weighed heavily on him, but he knew one thing for certain: humanity would not back down. They had come too far to fail now. "We'll take this one step at a time," Holt said firmly. "We don't need to know everything about this world. We just need to survive it and prove we can overcome whatever the Urath throw at us." The shuttle descended toward the surface of Zethra, and as it broke through the clouds, the team saw the sprawling jungle below. Massive trees with thick vines stretched across the landscape. The wildlife was unseen, but Holt knew it was there somewhere, watching and waiting. They touched down on the planet's surface, and immediately the temperature hit them like a wave. The air was thick and humid, the sounds of the jungle filling their ears with an eerie rhythm. The shuttle's doors opened, and the crew stepped out into the unknown. The ground was soft beneath their feet, and every movement felt sluggish in the oppressive heat. Holt took a deep breath and began issuing orders to the team. "We'll move quickly and stay in formation," he said. "No matter what happens, we stay together and keep pushing forward." The jungle around them was alive with strange noises, creatures they couldn't see rustling the underbrush, their sensors on high alert. Holt led the way through the dense foliage. The mission was simple in theory: survive and explore. But Holt knew the Urath had no intention of making it easy. Every step they took would be watched, every decision weighed carefully by their unseen observers. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, a sense of unease began to grow among the crew. The trees towered above them like ancient sentinels, their twisted branches creating a canopy that blocked out the sun entirely. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something more primal. Holt kept his eyes peeled for any sign of danger, but it wasn't long before they encountered their first real threat. The first sign of danger came without warning, as the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly, a low rumble that seemed to come from deep within the jungle. Holt raised his hand, signaling the crew to halt. His instincts screamed that something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Maya stood beside him, her eyes scanning the surrounding trees. Every leaf, every shadow seemed to be hiding something, but the jungle was still silent, too silent for comfort. Suddenly, the rumble returned, this time louder and closer. The trees shook as something massive moved through the jungle towards them, a sound like thunder crashing against the earth. The ground quaked beneath their boots, and Holt's heart skipped a beat as the air grew thick with tension. The creatures of Zethra were known for their ferocity, but this felt different. "Get ready," Holt said, low and urgent. "Weapons out, but stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with." Without warning, a massive form burst through the trees in front of them. It was a creature of nightmare, a towering behemoth, covered in thick scales, its massive jaws dripping with saliva. The creature had the body of a rhinoceros, but the head of a serpent, its eyes glowing with a feral hunger. As it locked onto the humans, before it, Holt's breath caught in his throat. But he didn't hesitate. He motioned to the crew, and they raised their weapons, aiming at the creature's exposed underbelly. "Fire!" Holt shouted. The first volley of laser fire lit up the jungle, but the creature didn't flinch. It roared in defiance, charging forward with an unstoppable force. Holt ducked as the beast's tail swung through the air, narrowly missing him. The creature was too powerful, too fast, for them to fight head-on, but they had no choice. They had to fight to survive. "Fall back," Holt ordered. "Stay in formation, don't break." The team quickly retreated into the thick underbrush, trying to distance themselves from the creature. But the beast followed with relentless speed, its enormous feet crushing the ground beneath it. The jungle was no longer a place of refuge, it was a battleground, and they were the prey. Holt could feel the ground shaking with every step the creature took, but they had to move quickly or they'd be overwhelmed. "Take it down from a distance," Maya shouted. "Aim for the eyes." Holt nodded as he repositioned himself, taking aim at the creature's glowing eyes. The team fired again, but the creature's scales were too tough to penetrate with their standard weapons. It was like trying to pierce armor with a knife. "This isn't working," Holt said through gritted teeth. "We need something bigger. We need to think smarter." Maya's eyes darted around the jungle as she scanned for a potential weakness. "We could try to outsmart it," she said. "The trees are dense here. If we can get high ground, we can drop on it from above." "Do it," Holt ordered. "We'll keep its attention while you set up a trap." The team moved quickly, splitting into two groups. Holt's group would keep the creature distracted while Maya and a few others set up an ambush in the trees above the clearing. The jungle was dense, but the massive creature couldn't keep up with their agility. Holt and the others darted between trees, firing on the creature to keep it focused on them, while Maya's group worked silently overhead. The creature roared in frustration as it lunged at Holt's team, its massive jaws snapping shut with a deafening crack. But the humans were too quick. They danced around it, just out of reach, leading it deeper into the jungle as Maya's group prepared their trap. When the creature was far enough from the main group, Maya gave the signal, and in a flash, the team dropped from the trees, using ropes to swing down on the creature. The sudden attack caught the beast off guard, and it staggered back just as Maya's group hit it with a barrage of grenades. The explosion rocked the jungle, and the creature let out a deafening scream as it fell to the ground, its body twitching violently. Before it lay still, Holt's team gathered around the fallen beast, breathing heavily, but with a sense of victory. They had survived the first test of Zethra, but Holt knew they couldn't let their guard down. Urath was still watching, and there was more to come. This was only the beginning of what the jungle would throw at them. The jungle fell silent after the creature's fall, its massive body still twitching slightly as the last echoes of the explosion faded into the air. Holt stood over it, watching carefully. He had no time to relax, no time to celebrate. The creature was dead, but the jungle was far from safe, and the Urath's test wasn't over, not by a long shot. The team moved cautiously around the fallen beast, checking for any signs of movement or danger. "We need to keep moving," Holt said, breaking the silence, his voice steady but urgent. "We've won this round, but we can't afford to stay in one place too long." Maya nodded as she wiped sweat from her brow. "Agreed, sir. But we also need to get some distance between us. And that thing, its roar could have drawn more predators, and we're not ready to fight another one of those just yet." The team quickly gathered their equipment and moved deeper into the jungle. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of decay, but the danger wasn't over. The jungle was alive with movement, and the team stayed on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, had them reaching for their weapons. They could feel eyes on them from the darkness of the trees. The creatures of Zethra were watching, waiting for their next opportunity to strike. They moved through the jungle for hours, the sun overhead hidden by the thick canopy of trees that blocked out the light, casting everything into a dim green haze. The terrain was rough and uneven, the ground slick with moisture, and the underbrush tangled and difficult to navigate, but they pressed on, their pace steady but cautious. "I don't like this," Maya muttered as she scanned the area. "It's too quiet, too still. It feels like we're being herded somewhere." Holt nodded in agreement. His instincts were screaming that something wasn't right, but they had no choice but to push forward. They had to reach their objective. The Urath were watching, and failure wasn't an option. Just as they began to move deeper into the jungle, a sudden movement caught Holt's eye, a flash of dark fur and sharp eyes, a figure darting between the trees faster than anything human eyes could track. "Did anyone else see that?" Holt asked, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. "I saw it," Maya replied. "Something's following us. but it's too quick to get a good shot. Stay alert, Holt said. We don't know what we're dealing with yet, but we can't let our guard down. They continued on for another hour, their steps becoming more cautious. As they ventured further into the jungle, Holt could feel the presence of something around them, a sense of being hunted that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Then it happened without warning. The ground beneath them began to shift. The trees groaned as if they were being disturbed from deep within the earth. A massive rumble shook the ground, and the trees around them began to tremble. Holt's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. It's an ambush, he shouted. Get to cover now. The team scattered in every direction, diving behind trees and rocks for protection. Just as the ground exploded beneath them, massive roots shot out of the earth, wrapping around anything in their path. The trees groaned and cracked as the jungle itself seemed to come alive. Massive tendrils shot out from the ground, and the air was filled with the screeching sounds of creatures leaping from the canopy above. The jungle had turned against them. The ground had become a trap. The trees were no longer silent sentinels. They were attacking now. Massive creatures swarmed from all sides, the air filled with the hiss of venomous reptiles and the pounding of massive feet as predatory beasts emerged from the underbrush. Holt's mind raced as he scanned the chaos. His team was surrounded, but they weren't out of options. They had weapons and training. They had been pushed to the edge before, but never like this. Hold the line, Holt ordered, his voice cutting through the noise. Do not break formation. We're getting out of here, and we're not leaving anyone behind. The team fought back with everything they had, weapons flashing in the dim light as they fought off the creatures that surrounded them, but the jungle seemed to grow more hostile with every passing second. More roots erupted from the earth, pulling at their legs. More creatures dropped from the canopy above, striking with deadly precision. Holt's team was under fire from every direction. Move toward the clearing, Holt shouted as he fired on a large reptilian beast that lunged at him, its teeth snapping inches from his face. We fight our way to the edge of the jungle, and then we'll regroup. The team moved as one, battling their way through the overwhelming assault. The jungle itself felt like it was alive and against them, but Holt knew they couldn't stop, they couldn't hesitate, they had to push forward. The clearing was their only chance at survival. The battle raged on with the jungle clawing at them from every direction. Holt's pulse pounded in his ears as he fought to keep his footing. The ground seemed to shift beneath him, roots wrapping around his legs, trying to pull him down. The creatures were relentless, their jaws snapping, their claws tearing into anything that moved, but Holt's focus remained fixed on the clearing ahead. That was their only chance, escape or die trying. Push forward, Holt shouted as he fired at a massive creature leaping towards him, its venomous fangs glinting in the dim light. Don't stop moving. Maya and the rest of the team followed his command without question, moving with precision as they fought their way through the chaos, weapons flashing in the jungle's dense underbrush. But the odds were against them. The creatures were faster, stronger, and more numerous than anything they'd encountered before. Holt could see the fatigue in his team's eyes. They were outnumbered, and the jungle seemed endless, but they couldn't afford to falter. They had to make it to the clearing. The roots beneath their feet seemed to rise higher as the jungle itself tried to trap them. Holt glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of the team behind him. They were holding their own, but just barely. A massive lizard-like creature lashed out at Maya, knocking her to the ground. But she recovered quickly, rolling to her feet and firing a blast that sent the creature reeling. Keep moving, Maya, Holt shouted as he shot at another predator closing in. We're almost there. They were getting closer now. The trees were thinning out, and the jungle was becoming less dense. Holt could see the faint glimmer of the clearing in the distance. But the creatures weren't giving up. The ground shook beneath them as a giant reptilian creature charged forward with terrifying speed. Holt barely had time to react before it collided with him, knocking him to the ground. The wind was knocked out of him as the creature's massive claws slashed at his chest. But he rolled just in time, dodging its attack and firing a shot at its vulnerable underbelly. The creature screeched in pain, but it wasn't enough to stop it. It lunged again, but Maya was there this time, firing a stun grenade that hit the creature directly in the face. The explosion sent the beast stumbling back, and Holt used the opportunity to regain his footing. Thanks, Maya, Holt grunted as he wiped the blood from his forehead. Now let's finish this. The team rallied around him, pushing forward despite the relentless assault. The creatures seemed to be closing in from all sides, but Holt wasn't about to let them fail. They had survived the first test of Zethra. They could survive this too, they just had to keep pushing. With one final push, they reached the edge of the jungle. The clearing was within sight, and the air was finally clearer, the heavy scent of the jungle giving way to fresh air. But the battle wasn't over yet. There were still creatures in pursuit, and the team was exhausted. But they made it into the open space, and they didn't stop running. "Regroup," Holt ordered as they finally made it to the clearing. "Form a defensive perimeter, and get ready for extraction." The team quickly fell into position, their weapons at the ready, but Holt knew that the Yurath were watching, and their trial wasn't done yet. They had survived the creatures of Zethra, but something told him that the hardest part was still ahead of them. The Yurath's true test had yet to come, and the clearing was just a temporary reprieve. "We're not done yet," Holt said, his voice steely as he scanned the horizon. "This is just the beginning. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." The team settled into the clearing, their breath heavy and ragged, but their resolve unwavering. Holt stood at the center, scanning the surroundings as Maya and the others took up defensive positions, their weapons trained on the jungle around them. They had survived the initial onslaught, but Holt knew better than to assume the worst was over. The Yurath would not let them off that easily. The trial was far from finished, and there was still an overwhelming sense of tension in the air. "They're watching us," Maya said quietly, her eyes scanning the tree line. "I can feel it. Something's not right." Holt nodded but didn't take his eyes off the horizon. The jungle was still too close, the clearing too exposed. They were sitting ducks. If something happened, the Yurath's tests were designed to break them, not just physically but mentally. They wanted to see how they reacted under pressure, how far they could be pushed before they cracked. Holt had seen it before in other trials, where those who thought they had won were struck down by the next challenge before they even had a chance to celebrate. "Stay sharp," Holt ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We don't know what's coming, but we need to be ready for anything." The hours stretched on with no sign of further danger, but Holt couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, something just beneath the surface. The atmosphere in the clearing felt thick with anticipation. The team kept their weapons ready and their eyes alert, but the jungle seemed to be holding its breath. Then it came, a flash of light so bright it blinded them for a moment. The air shimmered with an energy they could feel deep in their bones, and before they could react, the ground beneath them erupted in a violent tremor. The clearing cracked open, and from the chasm that formed rose a massive structure, a tower of black stone that reached toward the sky, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The Yurath's final test had arrived, and it was more than they could have imagined. "Get ready," Holt shouted, his voice rising above the rumble of the earth. "We don't know what this is, but we have to take it head on." The tower loomed over them, its presence suffocating and yet mesmerizing. Holt felt a strange pull toward it, as if the tower itself was calling to them. The structure seemed to pulse with an energy that was both alien and familiar, like something ancient and alive. The team hesitated for only a moment before moving forward, their feet carrying them toward the tower, as if they were compelled by an unseen force. The closer they got, the more the air seemed to hum with power. The energy surrounding the tower was overwhelming, and yet they pressed on. "What is this place?" Maya whispered as she approached the base of the tower, her voice full of awe and uncertainty. "I don't know," Holt replied, his eyes narrowing as he studied the structure. "But we're about to find out." As they neared the tower, the ground began to shift again. This time, it wasn't a violent quake, but a subtle vibration that ran through their feet and up their legs. It was as if the entire planet was alive and reacting to their presence. Holt felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, and he instinctively reached for his weapon. But before he could raise it, the ground in front of them split open, and a figure emerged from the depths of the chasm. The figure was tall and imposing, cloaked in shadows, its face hidden, but its presence was undeniable. The air seemed to grow colder as it stepped forward, its eyes glowing with an intense, unnatural light. The Yurath had sent their representative to finalize the trial, and Holt knew this moment would determine everything. "Welcome, humans," the figure's voice echoed through the clearing. It was a voice that seemed to come from all directions at once. You have proven your strength in the face of danger, and your resolve in the face of death, but now you will face the final test. Holt's heart pounded in his chest, as the figure's gaze seemed to pierce through him. "This is it," Holt said to his team, his voice steady, but filled with urgency. "We face the Urath now. We give everything we have, no matter what comes next."